When I was a postdoctoral student, I joined some of the other graduate students and postdocs for lunch one day, and the topic of DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, came up, as it casually does at academic institutions. Though this particular lunch discussion occurred before the term DEI had been coined, the concept was the same. Student A argued that individuals from underrepresented groups typically faced an unfair disadvantage in opportunity to access university education. Student B argued that the world is not fair and that selecting students based on background rather than merit is also unfair. A third, Student C, pointed out that even if the world is unfair, fairness should be our goal regardless. Now, you may feel more or less sympathy for the viewpoints of students A or B, depending on your own life experiences and identity. I would argue, similarly to student C, that both are correct. But advocating for the middle ground, which I'm not, doesn't necessarily dictate what action we should take as a society, if any, to promote fairness. Let's look at a hypothetical world in which the policies of student B are massively preferred by our society. That is, individuals selected for coveted or impactful positions will be primarily evaluated based on merit. Maybe if two individuals possess roughly equivalent merit, but one is from an underrepresented group, we can select the underrepresented one. Otherwise, the best candidate for the position should be selected regardless of that candidate's identity. This world favors productivity and progress. By promoting only the best, we can produce the most revolutionary gains in science, technology, government, economics, and so on. But how does one become the best candidate? While we may push a narrative that hard work and grit are important factors, and they likely are, there are additional factors that contribute significantly to success, like intelligence, nationality, or even our month of birth. Let's consider, for example, the observation that athletes born earlier in the year, typically January through March, in systems where age group cutoffs are set by calendar year, these athletes are more likely to succeed and reach higher levels of performance than those born later in the year. Presumably this advantage is gained not by any effort of the individual, but by being up to 1 year older than the youngest participants recruited at the same time, which can provide a noteworthy advantage in size and strength during childhood sports. The argument is that if I have a small natural advantage in a task, whether earned or inherited, I will be rewarded for doing that task. Just like in sport, being several months older than my younger peers during formative school years, and thus being slightly bigger and more developed, and hence more competitively advantaged. As we are given more opportunities to perform that task, and at higher levels of performance, we get even better, and what started as a small advantage early on becomes a massive one over time. Consider, of course, that the best performing athletes will be given more time on the field or on the court than the ones that don't perform as well. This snowball effect represents one of two possible avenues in game design. If I'm playing a competitive game against other people, and I'm able to, whether by skill or chance, generate some sort of advantage, does that advantage make it easier or harder to gain further advantage? When gaining advantage gives me more resources, which gives me more advantage and makes it easier to gain even more resources, this is known as positive feedback. In League of Legends, for example, good performance in the early game rewards players with an advantage in experience points, making them more powerful and likely to perform well later into the match. In such a game, the winners will often be light years ahead of the competition by the end of the match due to the compounding effects of advantage. Now, as a disclaimer, I have not played MOBAs, so I can't personally comment on the degree to which this form of positive feedback affects a typical game in reality. Now, conversely, a game can be designed such that further and further advantage becomes increasingly harder to obtain. This is also known as negative feedback or rubber banding. When I gain advantage, I may face penalties that slow down my growth, or other players may be given boosts that help them catch up or even the playing field. In Mario Kart, for example, randomly generated items like blue shells will specifically seek out and hinder the lead player, and more powerful items will preferentially be given to players that are behind. Though I also, in fairness, have not touched a Mario Kart game in decades, so I similarly can't comment on the degree of impact that this design philosophy has within a typical race. Now, there's no right or wrong answer here when it comes to game design, but knowing how your game will function is absolutely critical to predicting the fate of the game. In our merit-based world, the cost of productivity is a largely snowballing game. In the world of Student B, a few people will have massive advantage and will make world-changing impacts with that advantage, hopefully for the better, while the vast majority of people will have relatively little impact. Sound familiar? Consider alternatively if we lived in Student A's world. By promoting underrepresented groups, we may be passing up on the best candidate in order to even the playing field. After all, the advantages that made that candidate the best are often largely not through their own effort. It could just be that they were born 8 months earlier. DEI promotes rubber banding game design, and to many of us, it's obvious that this world seems more fair. In a reality where many people are struggling financially, while a few extremely wealthy individuals buy up companies, political policies, and their fourth homes, it makes sense that people would prefer to lean towards this principle of game design. Not only could such a world improve resource distribution for struggling groups, it would also improve agency, the idea that we are capable of orchestrating our own futures and overcoming barriers that may try, intentionally or not, to hold us down. This could provide a significant boost to morale in a society that's plagued by depression and meaninglessness. While I generally would prefer that we move at least somewhat closer to the worldview of Student A than where we are currently, by adopting policies that preferentially lift up those with less opportunity, I want to insist that Student B is not wrong. The viewpoints of Students A and B are both simultaneously correct. It is unfair that some people have more opportunity than others, especially when attained through means outside of their own control, such as time or place of birth, appearance, intelligence, etc. It's also unfair when we select an underrepresented candidate over another, more qualified one. The world proposed by Student A's view is my preference, but it is not necessarily better. Both worlds come with advantages and disadvantages. Now, this is where some people that might prefer this equitable world of Student A may start to feel your blood pressure rise a little bit. Nonetheless, I will still claim that promoting underrepresented groups is not a win-win. It comes with a cost. There are some superficial arguments which make claims along the lines of, by creating teams with diverse backgrounds and perspectives, we can make a superior team or product or whatever. I am a bit suspicious of this claim. While there is some evidence that diversity of perspective is useful in creating robust and versatile teams, this is rarely accomplished by simply finding a few people who look different to add to your team. Furthermore, selecting for diversity and selecting for merit are objectives that are sometimes at odds with each other. By intentionally selecting less qualified candidates, we may see fewer truly remarkable engineers, leaders, or influencers. The vast majority of us are not Jeff Bezos, but most of us do benefit from the ability to get almost anything we want delivered to our homes in 24 hours or less with free shipping. Now, I want to reiterate again that I much prefer a world where everyone has a chance to do meaningful, impactful work, rather than a world where most people are just cogs in the machines run by a tiny number of billionaires. But it does need to be said that this world does not come without cost. We should pay that cost because, in my opinion, the end result will be better for everyone on average. And if we see decreases in productivity as a result of equity policies, we shouldn't be alarmed. We should weigh those losses against improvements that we would expect to see in other areas. Areas like income inequality, access to healthcare, and decreases in homelessness and mental illness. DEI and similar policies are not obviously correct, pragmatically or morally. Like any other system, it will be good for some outcomes and poorer for others. We should be responsible enough to accept the weaknesses of equity policies and ensure that those policies, through their strengths, create real positive change for the average quality of life.